This episode of Building Men, part one of a conversation with our father, Dennis George Morolda. Happy Father's Day, Dad. We love you. Welcome to the Building Men podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Morolda. When was the last time you focused on self-care and the holistic health of your body? GM Revolution is a men's skincare line with a mission to introduce men to proper skin health. GM Revolution offers 5 skincare products that act as one to give men exactly what their skin needs. Whether you struggle with acne or you're looking to prevent fine lines, GM Revolution works hard to strengthen your body's largest organ, the skin, to fight as your body's first line of defense against your environment. Using code BUILDINGMEN, one word, you can save 15% on all of GM Revolution's products and start seeing the physical and mental benefits of skincare. GM Revolution encourages you to be the revolution in your own life. Now, back to the Building Men podcast. So, Dad, there's a little thing in the bottom left-hand corner. One, it'll say mute. You want to unmute yourself, and then you want to start video. What should I rename him right now? I'm going to have to rename him. Chest Rockwell?
Chestington Rockwell. Big Daddy.
I'm going to change his name every couple minutes as we're talking.
Yeah.
So people can see the name will change. We'll start with chest.
That's beautiful.
Listen, I don't know what to do right now with you. I don't know what to say. I'm like so. There's only been a couple of times in my life that I've been speechless. My first question is, are you wearing pants?
No. No, absolutely not. This does not require pants. I don't know if you knew that, but
I didn't know that.
Oh God, I feel so free.
This is the best interview we've ever done.
Who would have thought that you could wear a vest and just have nothing underneath and look amazing and feel even better?
And is Marty's tongue cold or warm?
It's lukewarm. Yeah, that's right. You figured out my secret.
98.6.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right.
Here we go.
Look at that. What's going on, Dad?
And not much.
So
I'm
wait,
here.
Are you wearing a white blazer?
Yes, I am. You are correct.
Yes. This is so great.
This is my favorite. So can you tilt the cat like the screen? There we go. And you're not wearing a shirt underneath the. Oh, you're wearing a black shirt. All right.
No,
At first, I didn't think you had a shirt on.
It's a tank top.
That's classic Don Johnson, 1985, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it is after Memorial Day. You're allowed to wear this outfit, actually.
I thought it was white pants for women. It's white blazers for men too.
Yes, it goes both ways.
They don't say that, but
so does your other son, apparently.
The unwritten rule. They said you don't need to wear a shirt with a vest like this after Memorial Day. You can wear that.
Right. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, come on. Look at us, you know?
All right. So I'm going to get us going here and we're going to jump into it. All right. So welcome to the Building Men podcast. Building Men is geared toward helping you become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. We are joined by a very special guest today. In addition to the biker of questionable morality and judgment, my younger brother Anthony, we are joined by Dennis George Morolda, my father. Welcome, Dennis. How are you? Welcome, Dad.
Good. Yeah, I'm doing good. Thank you. Nice to see you boys again.
All right. Yeah. So first things first, your name is Dennis as well. We both have the same name, but I'm not a junior. I'm just wondering how that happened. Why is that the case?
You know what? That's a good question. Thinking back, I think originally we were going to name you Christopher.
Oh,
And then I was actually talked into it by my brother-in-law. He actually said to me, "Oh, you have to name your first son after yourself," you know. And I never even gave it a thought of the having an exact, Dennis Jr. type thing, you know. I don't know. It didn't. It actually never even registered to do that to me, right, for some reason, you know. And I never gave it a second thought. I don't know. It was a long time ago.
And that was that Uncle Jimmy that said that?
It was Uncle Jimmy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
your life could have been so much different, Dennis, if you
I
were,
was Christopher Morolda.
or you were Dennis Jr.
Or if I was Dennis Jr.
I think you would have.
So we have different middle names. I'm Dennis Michael, you're Dennis George, and Mom did not like the middle name George. Is that correct?
You know what? Possibly not. I actually, my middle name came from my aunt. Her name was Georgiana. So my mother put the middle name in there, I guess, after her. If I heard correctly after questioning my parents about that. You know, there was so many Dennises in my family structure, and my mother didn't have too much of an imagination. So she just said, "Okay, why not name them Dennises? I know so many Dennises." So that's where, because there was a Dennis Plant, and then there was a Dennis Ori, which was a friend of the family's. So all that was just my mother not having too much of an imagination, you know, to name me something. I never really liked my name that much, to be honest with you, you know.
If you could change it to anything, what would you want your name to be? What name did you like?
I guess it'd be more of a common name, you know, like a John or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, which was, you know, maybe even a Michael, you know, I guess, you know, but you know what, because you got to realize there was a character when I was growing up, was Dennis the Menace.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I was, you know, if I had a nickel, as the phrase goes, for every time somebody, you know, referenced that Dennis the Menace to me, you know, it would be, I'd be quite wealthy. You know, because so I didn't really care for the name that much. I really didn't, you know. No.
See,
it's not a very common name, you know.
Not anymore. It's not. Yeah, no. I felt the same way growing up. I didn't like my name. I always thought I wanted to have a different name. I think I wanted to be called like Luke or like, you know, like Blaze or like something like
Blaze.
Xavier.
Well, so Denny. So I have a son. He's Dennis Michael Jr. Right? We call him Denny. But when all of us are together, there's so many Dennises, Dens, Denny's. Yeah. So yeah, I figured I'd start there. Just the name, like we both have the same first name, but we don't. The middle names are different.
And even when I was around the other Dennises, they would call me D. So not to be confused with the other ones. You know what I mean? So it was, well, I was always called D.
Did they ever call you Big D?
Big D?
No, because I was the youngest, of course, out of all of them, you know? And so they just called me D.
When you were in high school, would you say in high school to the girls, do you want the D?
You want the Big D?
You mean from all the girls I dated in high school? Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
That was going back quite a ways, you know?
So, well, I mean, I don't know if you wanted an opportunity to address Anthony's physical appearance right now. We usually spend the first couple minutes just trying to dive deep into what's going on. I don't know if
you can just go. I mean, you don't have to address it. You remember the one time that I came downstairs and I wore all your clothes. Were you there, Den? When I was doing like a fashion show with all of Dad's old stuff that he had, and everyone was in the kitchen, and I came downstairs and I slicked my hair back and I wore all your shit that was in your closet. I know you might have walked away at that point because you were too ashamed of what your son was doing, but
no, I actually recall one time that actually this is what Dennis did. I told him we were going over his aunt and uncle's house, and I didn't like the way he was dressed. So I said, "You're not going there like that." I said, "Go upstairs and wear something more appropriate." So he went upstairs, and he came down almost dressed like I was dressed. I think he had suspenders on or something like that, but he did it purposely to give me a little dig. And I started cracking up laughing. I thought it was hysterical. You know?
That's really good.
Well,
That's I actually do remember that distinctively happening. Yeah.
we get a lot of our, our comedic timing and our wit from growing up in with you and all the different things. Before we got on, I talked to Tara for a couple minutes today. Tara said, I can't wait to listen. We just started talking about how you, as we were growing up, you would do all these things comedically that we just got so much out of them. I think back to some of the videos that you would do before videos were a thing. You would set up a tripod and do like a Christmas video, and you would do different things that would make people laugh. So the fact that we're sitting here today kind of in front of a video camera, and we'll talk about that in the future, but what I wanted to start with that was we figured we'll do a couple episodes with you. But we wanted to start with kind of like from the time you were born until maybe you met mom, start there in that journey and just kind of talk first about, your upbringing. We haven't learned a ton about, how you were raised and, your parents, and even, we've learned a lot about your relationship with your brother, with Uncle Nicky, but a lot of the things we're just curious about. So I was wondering if you could just start with talking to us a little bit about, even your earliest memory. Like, what's the first thing you remember as you were growing up?
Growing up, as far as, let me think. Okay. Well, in my household, it was as a young kid, I think I had a very good childhood. No complaints whatsoever with my mother and father, both. They were, my mom, she did she was very, she spent a lot of time with us, whether it was taking us sleigh riding, playing catch with baseball and stuff like that. Not so much my father with that, but I remember more with my mother doing that. And she was always a very generous person right to the end. I mean, that was actually a fault of hers. She was a little too generous with her money and stuff like that. And so, yeah, it was a nice childhood, up until my teenage years, I would say. Then things changed drastically during the teenage years. It was just my mother would go into depressions, I guess, and lock herself in the room, and where she wouldn't leave, basically, not really lock it, but close the door and just stay in there all day long. A lot of medications and stuff, and it was kind of depressing coming home from school and seeing that, And then my father used to we'd be working all day, and he would have to come home a lot of times to make dinner, and it was because that's the things she was going through and stuff like that. She was a little bipolar.
Yeah.
So that was an issue she had, and it was tough. It was tough to go through that for me and my brother during the teenage years, and stuff. But we always had freedoms, though. I mean, that part was, we were able to do basically whatever we wanted to do, go wherever we wanted to go. There wasn't a lot of restrictions in what we could do. Maybe that wasn't a good thing my parents allowed us to do. We did get into a bit of trouble because of it, but I look back on it and I loved it. I mean, the things we were able to, it was a lot of fun. I can't deny it. It really was. It was good. So all that part was good, growing up, But those are my early year. I can recall that I did overall enjoy my childhood, and even, except for the teenage years, with my parents, with well, not my father, my mother explicitly,
Do you think that your parents, I almost think what you're saying is you had a lot of, learned a lot of traits about, or maybe grandma took on more of a masculine role. She was the one who was, out playing catch with you and sled riding with you and things like that. And your dad took on a role where while he would provide for the family, but he was also coming home and cleaning and cooking and kind of taking care of that way. Do you think that you learned traits about masculinity from your mother, and maybe traits about, or maybe from both of them? Maybe I'll rephrase it. What do you think you learned about being a man from both of your parents?
No, it wasn't. My mother would be doing that stuff very young years, but I'm talking about from age 5. I call from 5 till 10, let's say. But then after that, no, it was completely different. My father was involved with all this stuff too. I mean, but he didn't have the time during the younger years. But of course, during we were playing baseball and stuff like that. He was the manager. He was the coach of my baseball team, and so he was involved with it somewhat. Yeah, he was. And through learning masculinity, not from my mother, absolutely not. It was from my father, even though he wasn't involved with sports. He never played sports in his life. Me and my brother did sports through just growing up the way we were, through the area we were. Sports meant everything to us, playing in the Little League or later on in whether it was a basketball league and so on and so forth. But that was just something we wanted to do and had to do. Sports was something, it wasn't even pushed, it was never pushed on by my parents, but it was something that we grew up with and had to play sports, had to.
So it was no one actually because it's just interesting that you usually your father is the one who puts you into sports and starts you going with that. So it was just more of you going out and playing and influence from your friends and coaches and just being out there. And that was the thing that kids do, or they did.
Oh, yeah.
It was just you just played sports. That was. Yeah,
yes, absolutely. It was you realize you go out during the day and you'd be playing stickball during the baseball season, and it was and you'd be playing all day long because there was so many kids outside playing, and you'd be doing that. And then when you were of age, I do believe it was age 9 at that point, you joined the Little League. Everybody did, And then during football season, you'd be out playing football, And it was just something everybody did, It wasn't there was no push from the parents, I mean, definitely not from my parents, We just wanted to do it, and we actually made it a point that we have to do this. You know what I mean? And basically, everybody who was somewhat athletic always did that. Growing up in Woodbridge Township, for sure. That's what it was like.
What lessons you learned from playing sports? What larger life lessons after having a lifetime playing sports? What are the life lessons you think you learned from competing?
Well, it was, as far as competing, that's something not as so much a youth, but as I got older, playing on a team, especially. I mean, God, I love that so much. It was just that team camaraderie, it was, and I got more of that when it was, I would say when I was in my 20s, that's when it really, I couldn't get enough of it, even after I was married, it was I could not give up sports, age, let's say 21 till 30. It was, I wasn't even willing to do it. Let's put it that way. It would have, if your mom didn't go along with it, it would probably cost me my marriage, because I was not going to give that up. There's no shot in hell. It meant that much to me, playing softball during the softball season, volleyball during the volleyball season, basketball during the basketball season. And then, and so, so basically it was year round. And then it was a football league I played in also. So, it was something I had to get out of my system, I guess. That's the way to look at it. That's the way it was, for me.
I think Mom played along, because Dennis would have been a fatherless child and Anthony wouldn't have been here. So
it didn't, it wasn't an issue. It was not, it wasn't. A lot of my friends, their marriage broke up because of it, because they felt the same way I did, and they weren't going to give it up, and their marriage broke up because of sports. Okay. But it was never an issue in the household, because it didn't bother your mother that I was playing sports. She used to go to some of the games, a lot of the games. So it wasn't a thing of me being out 3 nights a week playing sports, which I did pretty much year round during the different sports, the different leagues I was in. But, and then of course I grew out of that, age 30, I started 31, I started coaching you, Dennis, in Little League. And I gave up the sports end of it, playing in the leagues. That's what happened. Yeah.
So if you look back and you had an opportunity, like your 20s through 30 years old, is there anything that you would have done differently? You would have changed, or is it like, nope, that's exactly, I lived my life the way I wanted to live it, and I wouldn't change anything during that time?
During that time period, okay.
Like knowing what you know now. So as a 69-year-old man, if you were to go back and relive your 20s, would you change anything about your life during that time?
Okay. Maybe I could have spent more time with, so you and Tara were the only two born who was, born during that time period. Okay. So yeah, maybe spent more time, I guess, with you two, but you got to realize I was working. So there was so much work I was doing at that time. I was working a lot of hours though. So when I came home, a lot of times I would maybe take a shower and then get ready for going to play sports and do that, But I don't know. I mean, so I guess that would be the only thing I would say. Maybe if I was able to spend a little more time with spending with you and Tara, I guess, with the household things, doing that type of thing. I don't know. I guess that would be it. Otherwise, I don't know if I think it would change anything else. I look at it like I provided for the family pretty good. As far as money, there was never an issue. Never, ever an issue right till I became semi-retired, let's say, which was in the last couple of years, and because I worked hard, and so that's one of the prices you pay, I guess, when you put that much work and effort into your living, you have to sacrifice on one thing or the other, basically. That's what it was. Yeah.
So Anthony, if you want to jump in, and you could ask questions too. I mean, I don't want to just totally monopolize here, but as you talked about working hard during that time in your life, I mean, me and Anthony have talked about it several times. That's one thing that we certainly got from you was your work ethic, and we saw you bust your ass for your entire life, and you still, while you said you're semi-retired, you still work, and you still bust your ass. But I wonder if you were to go back and if you had an opportunity to pick your trajectory in life, a career that you wanted, like if you were a little kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Like what was something that you wanted to do?
Oh God, let me think. You're going to find this weird. I never gave it a thought. I never gave it a thought of, oh, I would really like to do this. I never said, I want to be a baseball player. I want to be this, be that. I never thought I could accomplish those things. So best way to say it, I always live for the moment. Okay. Live for the moment, meaning I always live my life to the fullest every day. Okay. Never looking that far into the future. It's the best way to say it. It's probably not a good thing, but that's the way I live most of my life. But I always, when I started working in the painting profession, when I worked for a company only for 1 year, I always saw the things that my boss had. And I said to myself, wait a second, I want to have these things that he has. Why am I working for this guy when I can do all this stuff myself and start my own business? And I always looked at it that way. I always wanted to achieve more in the line of work once I started that line of work that I liked. And I did like I did like my line of work. So I was willing to put everything into that because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed, seeing the after effect of what you start and what you finish, So and still to this day, I still like that somewhat, even though, the body's broken down quite a bit after all these years, doing it for 48 years, it's, there's only so much. But yeah, so I never really looked at it like what I wanted to be. I knew one thing, okay? When I was out of high school, I did not want to go to college. I had no aspiration to go to college. And almost every one of my friends, every one of them, and there was a big crew of friends I had at that point, they all wanted to go to college. Hardly any of them stuck with it, but they actually went. They went to college. I never wanted that. I just wanted to go out and work. And that's what I did. Yeah.
So it's funny because I hear you talk, and like when I hear kids now, and even like, I don't know, the last like 10, 15 years, like anxiety and depression is so apparent, right? And I think one of the reasons that that's the case is because kids don't live in the moment, and all they do is like think about the future, right? Like, you know, what am I going to be? What am I going to do? What's my path? What's my purpose? Not that that's a bad thing, but I think that people can take from what you're saying and learn something from that, because the fact that you were like, you didn't look that far ahead. You were just in the moment. You're like, this is what I got to do. I got to do this. And then you figured out what was in front of you, and then you went to the next thing, and then you went to the next thing. And you never thought too far ahead so that you'd be so worried about what you weren't becoming, or what, you know, what could have been, or not living or fulfilling your dreams or whatever. You know, you're just sort of, you're working and you're busting your ass and you're doing that and finishing projects. And that was enough fulfillment to you, which that is like, that's unheard of now. I feel like kids don't do that. They just like, they keep trying to find themselves, and they spend their, 15 years of their life trying to find themselves. And then, they're still living with their parents when they're 30 years old. And, granted, both the Dennis and I think we're probably overstayed our welcome a little too long, but it's funny hearing you say that, because I'm not surprised, and not that it's a bad thing. Either way, I don't think both of them are bad, but I think that there's something to be gained from what you just said there, because I think that's really important. It was like, listen, tomorrow I got to work, and then I'm going to come home, and then I'm going to eat, and then I'm going to go play sports. It's not like, oh my God, 6 months from now I have to do this, and then I have that, and then, I'm not living up to what I really want to be, and I always wanted to be this, and then you're like depressed and pissed off and resentful. And so it's interesting when you said that.
Yeah, some of them, one or two of my friends, I mean, they used to not make fun of me, but I remember one friend called me a working class hero. And that was a dig, obviously, calling somebody a working class hero, because at that point, they were just, a lot of them weren't even working, out of college, and they just, matter of fact, a lot of my friends, I put to work working for me when they got out of college. They didn't have a job. So quite a few worked for me for about, I would say 6 months to a year. And then they went on to whatever they were going to do, but I had my business already started at that point, because I was young. You don't realize I was 24 years old, and I already had a business going, So a lot of them were getting out of school at that point, and they started working for me. And it helped me, but it also helped them somewhat, to, for the time being, making a couple extra bucks. Some of them were just out of the service, getting out of the Navy, and they came work for me for a while, and it was good, it was good for them. Like I say, it was good for me too, I have a lot of good memories of all the guys even worked for me for all those years. They were friends too, it was good.
Do you think up to that point in your life, starting the business was the biggest risk that you took?
Yeah, you know what? It wasn't at the time, it was probably somewhat of a risk, but you got to realize it was such an easier way to start things at that point. And if you failed, it wasn't the end all, it really wasn't, because, it was, I was married at that point, so I wasn't even single. When I was first married, I was still working for that other company, and yeah, I guess I did take a bit of a chance, because if it failed, I'd be stuck, even, because how am I going to afford my mortgage? I actually had a house at that point. I had a house 1 year after we were married. I went right from an apartment to buy a house, So it was a big jump. But there again, I never looked that far and saying, oh my God, what if this happens? And I always looked at it like, I'm willing to take somewhat of a chance, because I saw the upside compared to the downside. And there was so much upside that it was definitely worth the risk, you know?
That's so, I love hearing that, because like the people living with like the what ifs in their life, it ends up controlling them, right? Like, what if this happens? Or what if being a natural born pessimist, it's like, it's impossible. It runs your entire life when you assume what the worst case scenario that's going to be. And that's why a lot of people aren't willing to start their own business, or they wait until everything is perfect. Everything in their life is the way it has to be. And as you know, it's never going to be perfect. Nothing
Right.
ever going to be lined up exactly how you need it to be. You just need to jump. You got to take a risk. And you were just like, you know what? I got to do this, because you were like, right now, this is the right thing to do. And I'm not going to look anywhere past this moment right here. And that's a scary thing to do. And I think a lot of people are like, they're not willing to do what you did. And I think it's a huge risk, but again, you made it work. So.
Yeah, there's always risk and stuff like that, Okay. It's probably a little bit harder today. There are more rules and regulations that weren't in place, at that particular time, So, but even later on, I took a lot of risks with jobs I took on. As a matter of fact, Dennis, you worked at some of those jobs, the exterior jobs and outside of apartment complexes doing the exterior work. And yeah, there was some of the people that I hired and stuff like that. And the insurance wise, if some of these guys got hurt, it could have been, I could have been in trouble, And I look back now, I'm saying, I don't know if I should have taken those risks, but it didn't happen. I took risks. And you know what? Fortunately, I made a lot of money taking those jobs on. I was never afraid to take any job on, because it was just like, I looked at it and said, wow, this job, I can make $100 and something odd $1,000 for the course of the year, taking this work on, and I'd say, yeah, I'm going to do it, So I always jumped into things like that. And the downside I look at now, looking back, even today, a couple of jobs I think me and Dennis looked at, exterior jobs, I'm more skeptical now, because I'm thinking to myself, oh, this could be somewhat of a liability. Do we really want to take this on? If something happens. Back then, I never looked at it like that. No. I guess I'm a little more conservative now, right, as I'm getting older. That's what happens. Yeah.
So you mentioned there were more rules now than there were then. Is one of the rules now that maybe you didn't have back then, that you're allowed to wear a white blazer before Memorial Day?
Yes, I do believe so.
That's a new rule.
I think that's strong. Yes.
You started that rule. It's now a rule. It's
now a rule. Well, yeah. Listen, it's a strong profession there of your commitment to that look. I love it. So it's made me think about, taking risk, but then when you have that, within you, like, okay, I'm going to take a risk in this situation, like inherently it comes from, recognizing a fear and being like, what the potential gain outweighs the risk, or outweighs whatever the fear is in front of me. So if you were to think back to, and again, I'm trying to stick within, the first, maybe 20, 25 years of your life here during this conversation, what do you think was your biggest fear growing up? Like, can you pinpoint one or two things you say that was something I was really worried about when I was younger, either elementary, middle, high school?
I guess somewhat. I guess it would be failure. A fear of. I guess it would be. Yeah. Failing at something. I'm just trying to think now with even acceptance. All right. So during my high school years and stuff like that, I dated a lot of girls, okay? And actually I was looked down upon by a lot of my friends because of this. Because you got to listen, during that time era, there was most of my friends, even they were going steady with one girl, okay? Basically that was it. And even though I had a steady girlfriend during most of my high school years, I always just wanted to go to the girls. It was just like, well, I said, basically want to say to myself, let me get this out of my system. I mean, I don't know, most guys are like that, but back then it was, that is something I wanted to date a lot of different girls during my high school years. And a little bit after that, until I got married. But it was just something. And so that, I guess there was also a fear of me not knowing whether I would ever be able to even settle down, that was going through my head during the years after I was out of high school. And I was going through a dark period at that time during, I guess up until the time I actually met your mother. There was just a lot of experimental things with some of the crowd I was hanging around with, whether it was doing different types of drugs and stuff like that. And it was the worst period of my life, without a doubt. I hated myself during those years. I didn't like where I was going, what I was going to do. And even I was being questioned, I guess to some extent, by my father. He didn't like the person I was, and I was never given an ultimatum in my household, but I didn't like where I was in that part of my life. So the fear was that during the dark years, it'd be like age 19 to, I'd say 21, those 2 years, during those 2-year period.
So to take like a deep psychological dive there, you mentioned you tried to date a lot of girls in high school, and I'm just interested to know what you think about it now. Do you think it was just you got bored, or was it almost like whatever that relationship was, you weren't fully willing to invest in it, or you were trying to find yourself, and it was by doing that, it was almost like accumulating the number of girls you can be with? I'm just interested in why you think your mind went that way.
Yeah, I guess it was more of an ego thing. Yeah, it was more of an ego trip.
What's your number? Yeah. Listen, when you have filet mignon so many times, you're going to want some chicken, you got to mix it up.
Yeah, well, it was, yeah. Yeah, I mean, was it a bit of being somewhat conceited and an ego trip that I was able to do that, all right, and date all these beautiful girls in high school and stuff like that. And I'm not condoning it, what I did and stuff like that, but I don't know. I mean, when you're at that age, and I guess you could both recall when your testosterone level is through the roof, being there when you were in your teenage years like that, it was just, yeah, I don't know. It was just something that was in me. I look back and I think myself, I just had to do that. I don't know why, but I did.
It's like the grass is always greener on the other side type thing. Like you're with someone and then you're like, oh, and then you see somebody else, and then
I was always looking at try to up my game with the girls I was dating. I would be dating the most pretty girl in high school, and I dated a lot of them, and I'd be still looking at another girl who I could possibly hook up with all the time. That's the way I was.
Big Becky.
Well, but it was, what I say, I think by a lot of my close friends, I don't think they liked it. And of course, I think they looked down on me somewhat because of that. And yeah, I remember a girl that I was just with her one time, dated one time with her. And she told me that I was getting known as a womanizer. Okay. And I didn't even know what that meant at that time. I had to look it up. I said, what the hell is a womanizer? I didn't even know what it was, and then I started thinking to myself, am I getting this reputation, And it made me realize at that point. And so I remember that distinctively, this girl saying this to me, and actually she wound up marrying one of my friends, one of my close friends at the time,
So
anyway,
what was the moment then? Was that the moment where it kind of shook you out of whatever headspace you were in? Did someone have to call you out on it by saying you were a womanizer, or was it something else? Was it a conversation with your father? Was it what was it that got you out of that mindset?
Uh, yeah, I mean, that was somewhat of an awakening, and it was also because of, I guess because of the one girl that I was dating more steadily, that, you know, I, I don't know. I, it just, it just happened to me all of a sudden. And then I just said, I was done being like that person after a while. I didn't like who I was, let's put it that way. That's the best way to say it. I didn't like what I was, and I wanted to get out of that person that I was. That was it.
So a lot of the people that I talk to on the podcast, they go through that same thing where there is a point in their life where they don't like what they're seeing, and they figure out a way to get out of that. So when you mentioned there was that point in your life, so however you came to terms with it, it was a conversation you had with someone, you looked in the mirror and you decided, I'm going to change what I'm doing. What were the steps that you took to kind of get out of that? You said that was your dark spot in life. So what did you do to get out of the dark spot?
Well, I guess it was when I started dating your mother, okay? And I actually knew I wanted to get married at that point, I wanted to, because I didn't want to be single anymore. I did not want that in my life. I wanted stability. I just wanted to have a household. I wanted this, wanted that, I wanted to raise a family. And I was done. I started at a young age. You got to realize I started at age 13, 14, So it was like, and going through all that, and then sowing my oats for all those years, it was just like, I didn't want to do that anymore. I was done with it. Where I think today's generation, explicitly more towards Anthony, they don't get it out until they're almost in their early 30s, most people don't get married till then. Back then, people got married in their early 20s, all my friends were married at that point. All of them were married in their early 20s, So it was a different time era too.
I wanted to talk about your relationship with your brother. So Uncle Nicky,
okay.
So you are a year younger than him?
Not quite a year, but I would say 9 months. Yeah, 9-10 months. Yeah.
So it's an interesting story, and I don't know. I mean, I'll let you kind of tell it how you want to tell it, because I don't know how much you would want to share, or Uncle Nicky would want you to share, just about one, how he kind of came into the family, and then your relationship with him growing up.
All right. First of all, I found it was normal throughout our young years, me and my brother. And then things changed around teenage years, early teenage years, 13, 14. He became a little more hostile towards me, okay? Let's put it that way. And I never understood why. I never understood why for many, many years. I found out when I was 16, 17, and I was at a dance, and his ex-girlfriend told me that, she said, I don't know if you know this or not, but your brother Nicky was adopted. And I said, it floored me. I said, what? What are you talking about? And I was like just walking around for the whole evening next day and the days. I had no idea. And then it was never discussed, though. Never discussed with me, him, my mother, my father, ever. Even after I was married and stuff, never discussed that my brother was adopted. But then I started putting a little 2 and 2 together with all the fights we used to have. And I started adding it up more. Why was he, some of the fights that we used to have were so, and I was in a lot of fights as a kid, fist fights with other, kids and stuff like that. Never was the worst fights I had was with my brother. Kick-ass fights, man. We used to beat the shit out of each other. And I never understood why, why, and he started most of these fights. I'm not saying that because this is my perception of it. It was. He started to fight with me. I could never understand why. And I never, until I started analyzing my head, there was something that he had, like, whether it was a jealousy thing or something, that he was taking a lot of his frustrations out on me. And at the time, I couldn't accept it. I really couldn't. I mean, because I didn't know it. I didn't know what was going on. I should rattle my brain trying to figure out why he would do these things. And I actually found out when my mother started discussing this with me. She actually said, "Do you know your brother was adopted?" God damn it. This was like, I must have been in my 40s at this time. And I said, yeah, I know that. I said, I found out not from you or Dad. I said, I found out from my brother's girlfriend. And it was never even discussed with me or him, ever. So it was that used to piss me off, how they would never even, my parents would have discussed it with me. My brother never even discussed it with me. Yet there was this somewhat hostility between me and him because of that. You know what I mean? And I never understood it. I just didn't, And
so that was never discussed as a family? Like, so you never sat down and they never and have you and Uncle Nicky had a conversation about that, even to this day, about him being adopted or how that made him feel or anything like that?
We somewhat did, we had a falling out for a 10-year period. And it wasn't because of that. It was for something else during a financial issue. All right. But then I said to myself, you know what? The family was apart for 10 years, his family and my family. And I just said, that's enough. I just said, let's get together. And we got together. I do believe it was on Mother's Day, a couple of years ago, and down La Valette. And I just said, let's get the families back together again. Let's forget everything. Because he even asked me what I wanted. I told him I don't want anything, nothing. I said, let's just get the families back together again. And what I discuss with him now more so, we just reflect on our years and growing up with my parents and most of the issues with my mother and laugh about them. Because there was quite a few things that's laughable. What my mother, some of the shit she did when later on in years, and she suffered from dementia, and some of the things she did, and so that's the things we discussed. And she got to realize he found the adoption papers in my father's safe. I think it was when it was age 12 with him. And he wanted to run away from home when he found those papers. And then he did, I think, run away from home, and they got him back. And then my parents discussed it with him, but not with me. I was just kept in the dark about it. So they always, of course, said, we love you like you're my own, kid. And so, but it was never discussed, which is a big mistake my parents made, was not doing that. She should have sat all of us down as a family and discussed this. And they didn't do that, And so I think that was a big mistake my parents made.
Do you, looking back, would have taken the opportunity to say, once you learned from your brother's girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, if you would have, when everyone's together, be like, hey, let's talk about this. I just found out that Nicky was adopted. This is a big elephant in the room right now. Let's talk about it.
Okay. Should I have did that? Yeah. You know what? I probably should have. Yes, you're right. I probably should have did that. And you know what? It probably would have made things a lot easier with me and him. You're right. That's a good point. That, I think, would have made it so much easier. And you know what? Probably would have saved a lot of fights. Yeah, really would have. Because I'm looking back now. That could have made things a lot easier.
But obviously, if that was the dynamic in your family, things like that probably weren't brought out to the surface and discussed in such a way that you felt comfortable doing it. I think it's so interesting that the day that you and Uncle Nicky reconciled was on Mother's Day. One of the things that stands out to me in my childhood, there's a couple moments, that stand out to you, and there's usually an emotion attached to it. And I remember your father passed away on Mother's Day. I want to say, what is it?
That's right.
1984? Was it 84?
Yeah, I was on Mother's Day. I forgot about that. That's right.
That he passed away. I remember you telling me and Tara about it. It was
in the backyard. Yeah.
Born. So the fact that you reconciled, it was probably 2 or 3, however many decades later that you reconciled with Uncle Nicky. The fact that it's on Mother's Day, that's significant.
Yeah, that's pretty. I never put those two together, but that's true. Yeah,
it's probably like subconsciously you didn't even realize that you were doing it, but just something about that made you both want to connect at that point, and that's so interesting.
Yeah, and it was weird because my mother, as she got older, became very bitter. She was a tough cookie, and she lived with my brother, and they went through a lot of turmoil with her. The stuff she used to do, I mean, it could be written in a book, and people would be shaking their heads, with some of the stuff she used to do to them. It wasn't good. She even tried. She would try to even separate me and my brother a lot of times, which I didn't like. And this is, she would try to pin one another against me and my brother against each other. And I even went into her one time and I told my mother, I said, Mom, what are you doing? I said, if you're trying to break me and my brother up, it ain't going to happen. So stop it. Stop doing this. And I think she kicked me out of the house at that point. She told me to leave. But I said, too bad, because we were close as families, me and my brother. Once we had kids and stuff, we did a lot of stuff, went on a lot of vacations together, to Florida, to Disney World and all that stuff. And it was, you guys remember that, right? Had a lot of fun.
Yep.
With my brother Nicky's kids. There was a lot of good memories,
So what we're going to try to do, Dad, is set up maybe like 3 different interviews. Maybe we'll do like once a month and just go through different kind of chapters almost of your life. And so I think today we wanted to cover maybe the first 20 or so years, kind of getting into a little bit about, your kind of how you grew up, just a question. I didn't know some of the stuff that you talked to us about today. So I'm really interested in. So I would close in this first chapter. We'll call it like this will be kind of chapter 1. If you had an opportunity right now to go back and have a conversation with your mom and with your dad, what would be a little bit of those conversations? What would you talk to them about?
Well, the first thing what you just touched on before, with being more revealing about each one of about themselves, which to this day, me and my brother have to find information about my parents out through my cousins and stuff like that, because they didn't reveal a whole lot about their past. And we didn't push them on it too much, saying, hey, I want to know what happened in your family, what happened to you. And that was kept pretty quiet. So I would have loved to have asked them more questions about themselves, and hopefully they were going to reveal it. I don't know if they would or not. And yeah, and just that thing about my brother, where they would change. I wish they would have changed the way they, that part of it, with revealing about him and making our family closer at that point, somewhat, and being more open. Yeah, that would be the biggest thing, But it was that I think that would be the biggest thing. Yeah, right there. I could probably think of other things, but I just can't think of them right now. Yeah.
And when we get back, we'll schedule another one of these in a month or so, and we'll do like chapter 1, chapter 2, and we'll kind of chronicle Dennis George Morolda and the White Blazer over the course of time.
Yeah, Dad, we're going to be in a competition about who's going to dress more outlandish now for these things. So you better come ready. I'm just saying, I got a whole lot in the toolbox here. So,
well, if you stole some of my wardrobe, I guess you can one up me.
A lot of this stuff is yours. We've been trading clothes for the last 15 years. So,
Anthony, let's be honest. A lot of the stuff that's in your toolbox is illegal in like 12 states.
That's true, but we don't need to talk about that on air. So let's you'll cut that out, right? Fine.
Well, Dad, thanks so much for talking to us for a couple minutes. Like I said, this will be over the course of time. I enjoyed this. think.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, we'll have to do it more. Absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt.
All
Cool.
right.
Well, Anthony, I don't know what else to say about you right now that people can't look at you and know what I'm thinking.
No, they're just gonna have to watch and see what I'm bringing to the table here, because it's a lot, and it's glorious. Yeah.
All right. So for Anthony Morolda and Big D, we're gonna thank you for
Big
listening.
D.
We'll see you next time on Building Men.
Thank you. Okay.